There were 37 people on my lawn holding paper plates and plastic fork. One guy had even brought his own Tupperware container like this was a catered wedding. A toddler was licking his lips. An elderly woman waved at me with the confidence of someone who thought she was expected. And standing proudly at the front of the swarm was Karen, oversized sunglasses, fake pearl necklace, and her signature HOA clipboard like she'd just orchestrated a presidential dinner. I hadn't invited a single one of them. I was still in my slippers. And just as I opened my mouth to speak, someone yelled from the back, "Barbecue time, baby," and the entire mob erupted in applause. That's when I realized the neighborhood's worst mistake wasn't showing up hungry. It was letting Karen think she could serve my generosity on a silver platter without asking me first. And I was about to serve something so hot it would burn her entitlement to the ground. It all started 2 days earlier when I decided to host a low-key backyard barbecue. Nothing fancy. Just some ribs, smoked wings, a few burgers for me and 5 of my closest friends. I even cleaned the grill and rearranged my picnic benches. I love cooking. Not for show, not for Instagram, but because food is the only thing that shuts my brain off. And that Saturday was supposed to be my break from a hellish work week, and a therapy session rolled into one. That's why when Karen strutted into my backyard uninvited while I was seasoning the chicken, I should have known my piece was on borrowed time. She didn't even knock. Just let herself through the side gate like it was her garden. Her high heels clicked on the patio like war drums. I turned and gave her a polite but confused smile. She didn't return it. Instead, she scanned the yard with narrowed eyes and nodded approvingly like a talent scout. "Oh, this is perfect," she muttered to herself. I blinked. "Sorry, what is perfect, Karen?" I asked, still holding a bottle of cayenne in one hand. She pointed to my setup. The benches, the fairy lights, the grill. "You're doing the HOA Summer Welcome Buffet, right?" she said, already typing something into her phone. My eyebrows furrowed. "What buffet?" She smiled, the kind of smile that makes you feel like you're 5 seconds away from being volunteered for jury duty. "I sent out the announcement this morning, didn't you see?" she chirped. "We're calling it Barbecue and Brews in the Burbs. The whole community is super excited. I actually promised them pulled pork, but if you can't do that, just make extra wings." I stared at her for a good 5 seconds, wondering if she'd taken a hit to the head. "Karen, what are you talking about? I never agreed to host anything." That's when her smile thinned into a line. "Oh, don't be like that, Jay. You're always grilling anyway, and people love your food. Plus, this is a great way for you to give back. You know, community spirit and all that." I opened my mouth and then closed it again. Karen, I planned a small private gathering with 5 friends. Not a buffet. And certainly not for the entire neighborhood. She crossed her arms. "You don't need to be so selfish, Jay. You're always cooking alone. Let people enjoy it with you. Besides, the flyers are already out, and I may have mentioned you were covering all food and beverages." I dropped the seasoning bottle. "You what?" She shrugged unapologetically. "Look, it's already gone viral in the HOA group chat. Just don't be a party pooper, okay?" And then, like a storm that ruins a wedding, she turned and walked away with the smugness of someone who just scored a free catering deal for 100. I stood there in silence for a moment, processing what had just happened. Then my phone buzzed. And buzzed again. And again. 25 text messages in 2 minutes. All from people I barely knew, asking what time the buffet started, what dishes they could bring to keep the vibe casual, and whether it was okay to bring their pet. One message just said, "I'll bring wine, but I don't share." I was equal parts furious and bewildered. Karen had not only hijacked my Saturday, she had transformed me from an exhausted cook into the unwitting host of the year. By the time evening rolled in, my grill plans were in shambles. My 5 close friends were already texting me memes of sardine-packed lawn parties. One of them sent me a photo of Karen's flyer posted outside the community pool. It had my name in big letters with free barbecue and unlimited wings as the headline. The background was a stock photo of someone else's backyard. Not even mine. My face turned red. I wasn't just being taken advantage of. I was being advertised. The next morning was worse. A neighbor I barely knew knocked on my door and handed me a box of paper napkins. "Can't wait for the buffet, man," she said with a wink. I was speechless. I nodded slowly and took the box like I had just received my sentence. Then she leaned closer and said, "Karen says you're making your famous sweet chili wings. I've been dying to try them." And with that she was gone. That's when the spark hit me. No, not the metaphorical kind. A real spark of fire as I stood in front of my spice cabinet. Ghost peppers. Carolina Reapers. The kind of peppers that had warning labels on the bags. That's when the plans started forming. I wasn't going to cancel the event. No. I was going to cook. I was going to grill every last wing. And I was going to make sure Karen got exactly what she asked for. Maybe even more. I started by texting my old college buddy Raj, who now ran an artisan pepper farm. He picked up on the second ring, and before I even explained he said, "Let me guess, HOA nonsense again." I told him everything. By the time I finished he was already laughing. He agreed to overnight me his hottest batch of peppers plus his specialty sauce called Lucifer's Tears. I thanked him and promised to send him the footage. That's when I brought out my old GoPros. Dusty but still functional. I charged the batteries and checked the angles in my yard. Front porch, backyard, picnic table, grill station. I covered every corner. If Karen wanted a show, I'd give her one. With surround sound and multiple angles. I even made fake menu signs for the trays. Safe wings on one side. Inferno wings on the other. I printed them in big red letters with small print that said "Consume at own risk." And just to be safe I prepared a waiver. If anyone ignored it, that was on them. As the sun began to rise on buffet day, I stood in my kitchen like a man preparing for battle. My apron was on, my hair tied back, spices laid out like a war map. I was ready to cook. I was ready to serve. But more importantly, I was ready to watch Karen and her entitlement melt faster than her mascara in a heat wave. And I made sure the cameras would catch every second of it. By the time the morning sun spilled over the rooftops, I was already 3 trays into my wing prep and halfway through a bottle of ghost pepper concentrate that smelled like napalm. The kitchen windows were fogged up, my eyes were watering just from being in the same room as the marinade, and my dog Max had retreated to the guest bedroom after one accidental whiff. I wore gloves, goggles, and an apron that read "Chief of Pain Delivery." The plan was no longer just a prank. It was a culinary statement. Karen wanted heat, attention, and credit. I was about to give her all 3 with enough spice to make a dragon weep. By 9 a.m., the back table was lined with trays labeled Inferno Batch and decoys labeled Regular Wings, which I had purposefully made as mild as oatmeal. The only true edible options would be hidden in the back corner under a cooler lid marked "Reserved for Invited Guests." I had made just enough to feed the 5 people I'd originally invited. Everyone else would dance with the devil, and not even know it until their lips were numb. The GoPros were running on all angles. One at the grill, one near the buffet table, one overlooking the porch, and one positioned across the street to catch wide-angle footage of the chaos to come. Each camera was disguised either as a plant pot or hanging birdhouse. I even placed a sticker on one that read "Smile, it's barbecue time," to make it feel like part of the theme. The final step was setting up the serving station near the back fence. I attached a simple chalkboard sign above it with 2 arrows. One read "Mild for the faint-hearted." The other pointed directly at the tray of glowing red wings and read "Extreme Eaters Only." I made sure to underline it twice and write "Not for Kids" in cap. Then I printed waiver slips and placed a small basket of them on the serving table, just in case any legal-minded neighbor wanted to accuse me of setting a trap. Which, to be honest, I had. I just wasn't stupid enough to do it without plausible deniability. At exactly 10:30, the first knock came. It wasn't one of my 5 friends. It was a couple I'd never seen before. They were dressed like they were attending a summer festival. The man wore a fedora. The woman had sunglasses larger than her face and held a reusable plate with cartoon fruit printed on the rim. They smiled like they belonged. Hey neighbor, she said brightly, we came early to help set up. I blinked. Set up what? She laughed like I just made a dad joke. Karen said you'd appreciate extra hands. We brought folding chairs. I stared at the plastic chairs in her trunk. Then I smiled. Of course. Come on in. Park them by the fire pit. Her husband gave me a thumbs up and said, hope you made a lot of wings. That phrase would become the curse of the day. Within the next half hour, my backyard looked like it was hosting a block party sponsored by a chili company. People flooded in, chatting, laughing, slapping each other on the back. A group of teens started setting up a Bluetooth speaker. 2 kids ran across my lawn chasing a beach ball that knocked over my garden gnome. One guy carried a 6-pack of soda and shouted who brought the karaoke. And then, like a final boss in a video game, Karen arrived. She wore a sun hat with a ribbon, a clipboard in one hand, and a Bluetooth headset that made her look like she was managing Coachella. She strutted in like the queen of the cul-de-sac, already giving out instructions. Tables there, drinks here, and Jay darling, I'll need your garden hose by the swing set in case someone gets sticky fingers. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The scent of ghost pepper wings was already thick in the air, and it wouldn't be long before it claimed its first victim. Just as I predicted, people rushed the serving station like it was Black Friday. I stood behind it smiling, handing out paper plates, nodding as they complimented the smell. Oh, these look amazing. Are they sweet or tangy? Both, I said with a perfectly neutral face. I made sure to point to the signs. 1 or 2 people raised eyebrows at the extreme heat warning, but no one took it seriously. One guy even said, "Ha, you're funny," and took sick. Karen, of course, was the loudest. Oh please, I eat Thai food twice a week. This will be nothing. I could already see the red in her cheeks as she grabbed 3 wings and bit into one without hesitation. That moment was silent. Then her eyes widened, she froze mid-chew, and a noise escaped her throat that sounded like a reverse sneeze mixed with a dry cough. She blinked rapidly, then started fanning her face with her clipboard. Her headset slipped off. She tried to play it cool, nodding and saying good as sweat began to drip down her temples. Around her, the chaos rippled. The first guy to bite into a wing ran straight to the garden hose and turned it on, trying to aim it into his mouth. A woman started coughing so hard she knocked over the salsa bowl. A kid screamed it's fire chicken and threw his plate into the bushes. One man started doing laps around the picnic table like he could outrun the spice. Karen, meanwhile, was trying to maintain composure while clearly fighting back the urge to scream. She grabbed a soda can, cracked it open, and downed it. It did nothing. The carbonation made it worse. Her voice came out raspy when she tried to speak, and she pointed at me with trembling fingers. What did you put in these? I raised both hands innocently. They're ghost pepper wings, Karen. Didn't you read the sign? I gestured at the waiver pile. She squinted at it, still gasping. Someone finally shouted, "We need milk." A neighbor ran to their car and returned with a jug of almond milk, which caused a minor stampede. People were holding their mouths, fanning themselves with paper plates, and one guy was crying under the patio umbrella muttering, "Why did I eat 3?" I watched all of this from my grill station with the calm of a man who had planned every second. I even offered wet napkins. Karen stumbled toward me, her makeup smudged, eyes wild. You did this on purpose. I tilted my head. Did what? Cook food. Host the buffet you organized without asking me. I warned people. The signs are clear. I even had waivers. Want one? I handed her a slip. She snatched it and tore it in half. You think this is funny? I looked around at the backyard chaos. Honestly, a little. Just then, my friend Tyler showed up. One of the original 5 I actually invited. He surveyed the scene, spotted the guy drinking from the hose, and said, "What in the hot sauce hell did I miss?" I handed him a plate of the mild batch from the cooler. You made it just in time. He bit into one and smiled. Man, these are great. What happened to everyone else? I nodded toward the pepper tray. Karen threw a wing buffet. I just brought the flavor. He nearly choked laughing. Dude, remind me never to cross you. I smiled wider. That's the plan. Now past the ranch. By the time the sun began to set, my backyard looked like the aftermath of a food fight in a sauna. People slowly cleared out, still wiping sweat and muttering about lawsuits and tongue damage. Karen stormed out last, her heels sticking in the grass, swearing under her breath. I watched her go and waved. That's when I turned to the nearest camera, winked, and whispered, "Coming soon to your screen, Karen's Spicy Nightmare. Episode 1. Then I turned off the grill. Tomorrow, the real fire would begin online. By the time I uploaded the footage that night, my kitchen still smelled like a war zone of capsaicin and regret. The camera files were crisp, perfectly angled, and captured every glorious second of chaos with high-definition clarity. Karen's face, going from smug to scorched in less than 5 bites, was the crown jewel of it all. One particular shot, where she tried to remain composed while tears streamed down her cheeks and she attempted to give instructions through a mouthful of fire, had the potential to become a meme. I didn't add music, didn't add commentary, just edited together the clips, labeled it the Ghost Wing Incident, and scheduled it to go live the next morning on my food blog and YouTube channel. I wasn't expecting it to explode. Not yet. I just wanted proof. Proof that I didn't bait the neighborhood. That I'd labeled everything. That Karen had created this mess. And, perhaps selfishly, proof that I could take back the narrative after she hijacked my peaceful weekend for her HOA vanity parade. The video barely needed any edit. It practically edited itself. The sequence of guests going from excited to combusting was its own kind of tragicomedy. I added timestamps with tiny captions like "Man tries to rinse tum with soda" and "Karen attempts to sue a jug of milk." One moment in particular, where a teen throws his plate in panic and yells, "Why is my face melting?" had me laughing out loud at 1 a.m. I left in the waiver pile footage, made sure every tray label was visible, and ended with a slow zoom in on the chalkboard that said "Extreme Eaters Only" with Karen in the background, red-faced and fanning her tongue with a HOA flyer. By morning, the video had 50 views. By noon, it had 4,000. By dinner, it had crossed 25,000, and comments were pouring in faster than I could read them. Most people found it hilarious. Some were asking for the recipe. Others were debating whether ghost pepper wings should be classified as chemical warfare. A few even suggested I start a challenge series. I received emails from hot sauce companies, prank video curators, and even a chili farm in Arizona offering to sponsor my next event. But what made me really laugh was a comment that read, "This is why you never RSVP to anything hosted by someone named Karen." The neighborhood, however, was split. Some folks found the whole thing funny and said it served Karen right for overstepping. Others grumbled that I had taken things too far and blamed me for the spice-induced trauma that had swept through our cul-de-sac like a culinary wildfire. The HOA president, Mr. Arnold, called me directly. He sounded like a man who had just been asked to moderate a cage match between 2 porcupines. "Jay," he said slowly, "I'm not saying I approve of the video, but let's just say I watched it 3 times and spilled my coffee each time Karen tried to scream." I suppressed a grin. "So what happens now?" He sighed. "Karen filed a formal complaint. She wants us to fine you. Possibly even suspend your community privileges." I raised an eyebrow. I didn't know those were a thing. Apparently they weren't until today. Later that afternoon, I received a certified letter from the HOA. It was as dramatic as you'd expect. Words like malicious intent and willful endangerment were tossed around like confetti at a courtroom circus. Karen had drafted a full statement, accusing me of psychological harm, public defamation, and attempting to poison community members with sadistic food trick. She even claimed her sunglasses had melted, and that her lipstick had chemically bonded to her upper lip due to the heat. She ended her letter with a demand for a public apology, removal of the video, and compensation for emotional distress. I read the letter twice. Then I opened my laptop, took a screenshot of the waiver table again, and emailed it to the HOA board along with a simple caption that said, "Kindly refer to Exhibit A." I didn't take the video down. Instead, I uploaded a follow-up. This one was shorter. It was a behind-the-scenes montage of me preparing the wings, showing the label signs, the GoPro placements, the waiver slips being stacked. It was calm, methodical, and quietly devastating to Karen's claims. The caption read in case anyone's still confused. Within 12 hours, that video had half the viewership of the first and twice the impact. Comments turned more vicious against Karen. People started stitching the video, making jokes, reenacting her facial expressions. One guy did a dramatic reading of her HOA letter using opera voice and posted it as Karen's hot wing aria. By the next day, I noticed Karen hadn't posted in the community forum. That was rare. She usually chimed in daily about garbage bins being out of alignment or someone's lawn being 1 inch too wild. But she'd gone silent. It wasn't until I ran into her at the grocery store that I realized the depth of the damage. She was wearing a scarf over her head, giant sunglasses, and walked with a hurried limp like a celebrity dodging paparazzi. I said nothing as I passed her in the hot sauce aisle. She saw me, turned, and immediately walked away without a word. Back home, things had taken a turn. Some neighbors dropped by just to laugh. One brought cookies shaped like flames. Another handed me a sketch of Karen breathing fire. But there were still a few sour faces. One man asked me why I hadn't made everything mild and labeled only the spicy batch. I calmly pointed out that I had done exactly that. He huffed and said, well, maybe next time make everything mild and write a sign that says prank not included. I nodded and thanked him for the feedback, all while mentally preparing a ghost pepper lemonade recipe. The funniest twist came 2 days later when a package arrived on my porch. No sender name. Inside was a plastic trophy that read 2025 Cul-de-sac Iron Chef of Spite. Taped to the base was a sticky note that read sorry about Karen. Keep cooking. That was the moment I knew. The neighborhood might not fully admit it, but deep down, most of them appreciated what I'd done. I didn't start a fire. I just handed out matches and asked if they read the warning labels. That evening, I uploaded a final video. Not spicy. Not chaotic. Just a short thank you clip. I stood in front of my grill, thanked the viewers for their support, showed off the trophy, and gave a teaser for a future barbecue episode called The Fire Extinguisher Feast. I didn't mention Karen. I didn't need to. Her silence was louder than anything I could post. As night fell, I sat outside with Max by my side, sipping lemonade and watching the view count tick up like a heartbeat. Somewhere across the street, behind drawn curtains, Karen was probably drafting her next complaint. But I had a new plan. A better one. And this time, it involved something even hotter than wings. It involved the truth, and the entire neighborhood was finally paying attention. The envelope was thick, overly formal, and stamped with gold trim that looked like it belonged to a wedding invitation, not a notice of disciplinary action. But that's exactly what it was. I opened it slowly, already guessing who it was from. Inside, the HOA board, at Karen's insistence, had called for an emergency hearing regarding my quote-unquote aggressive culinary retaliation and failure to maintain peaceful neighborhood dynamic. That last part made me laugh out loud. Karen had practically staged a food riot on my lawn, and I was the one being accused of disturbing the peace. It was scheduled for Friday evening in the HOA conference room, which was really just the library annex behind the pool house. I tossed the letter on the counter and stared at Max, who looked up from his chew toy with mild interest. Well, buddy, looks like we're going to court. Sort of. I arrived 10 minutes early, dressed in a polo shirt and jeans, just casual enough to show I wasn't intimidated. The room already held most of the board and a few nosy neighbors who had probably shown up for the drama. Karen sat at the far end, flanked by a man in a cheap suit who I assumed was her cousin playing pretend lawyer. Her face was tense, her arms crossed tightly, and her lips curled into that same smirk she always used when she thought she had the upper hand. I gave her a polite nod and sat down on the opposite end. The board president, Mr. Arnold, cleared his throat and welcomed everyone before launching into a bland summary of the agenda. I didn't pay attention to his words. I was watching Karen, and more importantly, I was waiting for the moment she'd realize her entire case was about to unravel. She spoke first. With theatrical sincerity, she explained how the ghost pepper wings had caused real distress. Children cried. Adults suffered. One man nearly fainted. She blamed me for everything from public humiliation to potential long-term digestive damage. She even claimed she was having nightmares about flames. Her pretend lawyer chimed in with words like negligence and hostile intent. He cited an obscure HOA rule about community events requiring approval. Karen looked pleased, satisfied even, like she'd finally cornered me. When the board asked me to respond, I simply reached into my folder and handed out printed screenshots. They were still frames from the videos showing the tray labels, the waiver basket, and the signs reading "Consume at own risk." The room shifted. Board members leaned forward. Karen leaned back. I spoke calmly, clearly, with no need for drama. I explained that the food was labeled, the waivers were visible, and that I had never invited anyone outside my original group of 5. I reminded them that Karen had not only promoted the event without my knowledge but had used flyers, group chats, and public announcements to make it happen. One of the board members raised an eyebrow and asked Karen if she had a copy of the flyer. She did. She brought it out with pride, like it was evidence against me. It backfired immediately. My name was printed across the top, next to a cartoon of a smiling chef. I asked her who designed it. She said she had. I asked if she had received written permission from me to use my name. She said she assumed I'd be fine with it. I turned to the board and smiled. There it is. Assumption. No consent. No coordination. Just a rogue event thrown at my house without my approval. Karen's face tightened. Her pretend lawyer stammered something about community expectations. One of the board members held up the waiver photo and asked if it was legitimate. I nodded. He shook his head slowly and said that looked pretty clear to him. Mr. Arnold sighed, clearly wishing he were somewhere else. After a few moments of silence, he declared that while the event had unfortunately gone off the rails, the board could not find me in violation of any rules. In fact, he added, there would be a formal review into how events are approved moving forward to prevent another misunderstanding. Karen's jaw clenched so hard I could almost hear her molars crack. She stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair, and stormed out of the room without another word. Her pretend lawyer followed sheepishly, dropping his briefcase in the process. As the room emptied, I received a few nods and a couple of quiet thumbs up. One woman leaned over and whispered that she'd never seen Karen lose in public before. I thanked her and exited with my head high and my blood pressure blissfully steady. Outside, I took a deep breath and exhaled. It wasn't over. Not really. Karen wasn't the type to go down quietly. But this round was mine, and she knew it. The next few days were eerily calm. Karen didn't post. She didn't patrol. She didn't host one of her usual passive-aggressive sidewalk chats about lawn decor and trash bins. It was like she'd gone underground. Until Sunday. That's when the invitations arrived. Hand-delivered to every house on the block. Karen was throwing a quote-unquote apology brunch at the community center. No mention of the Wings incident. Just a friendly gathering to reconnect and move past recent tensions. I didn't plan to go. I figured she wanted to reclaim her image. But then I got a call from my friend Tyler. He told me someone had sent him a screenshot of a private HOA chat. Karen had apparently told a select few that the brunch was actually a chance to screen her edited video version of the barbecue incident. She planned to share clips that made her look like a victim, reframe the story, and accuse me of setting her up. I laughed. Then I got to work. I arrived at the brunch 15 minutes early, wearing the same calm expression I had worn to the hearing. I brought a laptop, a portable speaker, and a small projector. I asked the manager for permission to set up my display and, since it was open floor time, he agreed. Karen hadn't arrived yet. but people were already sipping orange juice and munching mini quiches. I loaded the full original video. Not the edit, not the clips, the uncut, unedited footage from every camera. Just before Karen walked in, I pressed play. The room filled with familiar sounds. The crowd cheering. Karen yelling instructions. The signs warning about the spice. Her biting into the wing. The change in her face. The panic. The hose. The milk. And then, her accusing me while wavers fluttered in the wind. Laughter broke out almost instantly. Some people gasped. Others turned red trying to hold it in. Karen froze in the doorway, her brunch tray trembling in her hands. She saw the video, the expressions on everyone's faces, and her mouth opened, but no words came out. Someone clapped. Then another. Then a full round of applause. It was brutal. It was brilliant. Karen dropped the tray and left without saying a word. The projector stayed on. I let the video loop twice. No one stopped it. By the end, even the most neutral neighbors were smiling at me with the kind of quiet respect usually reserved for local heroes or judges on a cooking show. That night, I received a letter under my door. No name. Just 4 words. She won't be back. I smiled, poured myself a drink, and toasted the screen where Karen's frozen, tear-streaked face looked like a still from a documentary about volcano eruptions. Justice hadn't just been served. It had been plated, garnished, and brought out with a flaming dish cover. And Karen's brunch? Let's just say no one asked for seconds. 2 days after the infamous brunch screening, I woke up to find a note taped to my front door. It wasn't the usual HOA paper with official stamps or Karen's passive-aggressive handwriting. It was handwritten in blue ink, short and almost sheepish. It simply said, "Sorry about everything. You were right." And under it, scribbled hastily, was Karen's name. I stared at it for a long moment, unsure whether it was real or some kind of twisted joke. Max sniffed it like it might explode, and honestly, I couldn't blame him. This woman had launched a neighborhood-wide misinformation campaign, ruined my peaceful Saturday, and tried to get me fined for handing out spicy wings. A note didn't feel like enough. But something about the way it was written, the tilt of the letters, the slightly smudged ink, told me this wasn't Karen's usual performance. It was something else. Defeat maybe. Or embarrassment. Either way, it marked a strange shift. For the first time since the barbecue war began, Karen had gone silent. And she stayed that way. The next week passed with remarkable quiet. No flyers. No announcements. No complaints about lawn heights or trash lid. Karen's once daily patrols vanished entirely. Some neighbors speculated she had gone to stay with family. Others said she was hiding out in shame. A few thought she might be regrouping for a bigger comeback. I didn't care either way. My grill was back to normal, my weekends were peaceful again, and my food blog had more traffic than ever. The Ghost Wing video had passed 100,000 views, and a regional hot sauce company had sent me a care package with a handwritten letter that read thanks for putting our fire to good use. I even got invited to do a local radio segment about food safety and neighborhood drama. Apparently, my story had become something of a legend among HOA members around the state. Then came the invitation I wasn't expecting. The HOA board sent out notices for the annual neighborhood celebration day. It was usually a bland affair with plastic chairs, sad potato salad, and speeches about parking violations. But this year they wanted something different, something fun, something unforgettable, which is why the letter read we would like to formally invite Jay Thomas to be our guest of honor and host for this year's community cook-off. I nearly choked on my coffee. They wanted me, the guy Karen tried to sue for wing-based warfare, to headline their biggest event of the year. I reread it twice to make sure I wasn't misinterpreting. But there it was, signed by the board president and 2 other members who had previously voted with Karen on almost everything. The tide had shifted, and they wanted me to ride the wave. I agreed on one condition: that I could cook what I wanted, the way I wanted, with the message I wanted. They didn't hesitate. "We'd love that," they said. "We trust your judgment." That part almost made me laugh. A few weeks ago they were questioning my intentions. Now they were handing me the main stage. So I started planning. And what I came up with wasn't just a recipe. It was a message. A final course, if you will, to wrap up the entire saga. When the day arrived, the park was filled with booze, music, and more people than I'd seen gather in one place since the last HOA election scandal. There were balloon arches, face painters, and even a bounce house. But right at the center stood my booth. A simple white tent with one big wooden sign. Community feast, no surprises, just spice. The smell of smoked meats, garlic, and carefully balanced chili filled the air. This time, I didn't use ghost peppers. No pranks. No waiver forms. Just good food. The kind meant to bring people together instead of blowing their taste buds apart. I served wings, ribs, and vegetarian options with clear labels and mild to medium spice levels. No fire alarms needed. People lined up fast. I saw familiar faces, some of the same ones who had cried into the garden hose at my last event. They laughed about it now. Several even asked if I had saved one ghost pepper wing for nostalgia's sake. I said maybe and winked, though I hadn't. I wanted this day to be clean. Something different. A proper ending. That's when I saw her. Karen. She stood at the edge of the crowd, not dressed up, no clipboard, no sun hat. Just jeans, a plain blouse, and a tired look. Her eyes met mine for a second, and then she looked away. I didn't wave. Neither did she. But she walked slowly toward the booth, got in line like everyone else, and when her turn came, she simply said one order please. I handed her a plate. She nodded and stepped aside to eat quietly at a nearby table, blending in for once instead of hovering over everything like a storm cloud. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Later that afternoon, the board handed me a small plaque. It read Community Builder Award in recognition of resilience, humor, and unmatched grilling. People clapped. Someone joked about installing a warning sign on my driveway. I gave a short speech. Nothing dramatic. Just a thank you, a few words about respecting each other's boundaries, and a reminder that spicy food should always come with a heads up. It got a few laughs. One of the board members shook my hand and said you turned a food fight into a community event. I smiled and said well, they say revenge is best served cold, but I prefer it slow-cooked over mesquite. The sun dipped low as the event wound down. Kids ran around with painted faces, parents packed up chairs, and music faded into background chatter. I stood by the grill, cleaning up, when Karen walked over again. She looked at the plaque, then at me. You didn't have to be that nice, she said. I could have made this worse for you. I nodded slowly. You did. But it's over now. She looked like she wanted to say something else but didn't. She just gave a small nod and walked away. And just like that, the saga finally ended. That night, back on my porch with Max curled at my feet, I watched the quiet street under the glow of porch lights. It felt like the neighborhood had exhaled. I sipped my drink, checked the blog comments, thousands of likes, a dozen new followers, and uploaded one final video. A calm one. Just a thank you montage from the cook-off, set to some mellow jazz. No chaos. No screaming. Just smiles, sauce, and second chances. And before I went to bed, I updated the subtitle of my blog. It used to say Recipes for One. I changed it to Recipes for Everyone, with a warning in parentheses that read unless Karen's organizing it. Max barked once like he approved, and for the first time in weeks, I slept without thinking of wings or waivers or war. It was over. The fire had burned out. But the flavor? That would last forever.